Welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Well, we all know about big tech censorship and how these liberal bias companies deplatform and demote content they don't like. And we all know they're trying to manipulate us into not seeing certain people or ideas because they want us to behave or vote a certain way. Well, tonight, our guest says it goes way, way deeper than that. And what they're really doing is much, much more dangerous. Dr. Robert Epstein is a Harvard-trained psychologist. He was the editor-in-chief for Psychology Today and was heavily revered and respected by his peers until he exposed one of the greatest scandals in history. He has proof big tech, in particular Google, is interfering in our elections and throwing them for Democrats. He himself has always been a left-leaning person who supported Hillary Clinton, but he couldn't ignore the proof in front of his eyes. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016, and Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Or did they? Numerous elections likely would have gone in different directions altogether if it weren't for the methodical and very purposeful manipulation by big tech. And tonight, Dr. Epstein explains exactly how they do it and the power they wield. But first, the IRS is making a huge push. They've already hired over 16,000 agents in the last few months. Now, remember, they said they were going to be hiring 87,000 new agents, so this gets them much, much closer to their goal. Now, by hiring these agents, the IRS is getting more aggressive in an attempt to prove that they're here to stay. They're going to be levying bank accounts, garnishing wages and Social Security benefits like never before. They can even seize your property, like your business, home, or retirement accounts. Yeah, they can take anything of yours that they want. So if you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, don't run and don't let the government take advantage of you. Tax Network USA is a nationwide tax resolution firm who can help protect your rights and settle your back taxes, and even in some cases can zero out your balance altogether. They're experts in all IRS programs, and they understand tax law, so you don't have to. Now, over the last 14 years, Tax Network USA has saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients. So regardless if you have a payment arrangement already, they can help you. Whether you owe a few $1,000s or you owe a few $100,000, they can help you. Even if you haven't filed in over 5 to 10 years, they can help you. So go to taxnetworkusa.com/Kim to get yourself started. All right, Dr. Robert Epstein, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure.
So let's start off with how did you get into this research to begin with?
It started on New Year's Day, actually, in 2012. I got, I think, around 8 or 10 messages from Google saying that my website had been hacked and that they were blocking access. Then I started getting interested in Google for various reasons. One was, why were they notifying me? Who made them the sheriff of the internet? Why wasn't I being notified by a nonprofit organization or government agency? And then I found that they were blocking access to my website, not just through the Google search engine, but through Safari and through Firefox. And I thought, wait, that's impossible. How could they do that? So I did eventually figure that out. That led to an article I published in U.S. News and World Report, a big article called "The New Censorship." It's at thenewcensorship.com if anyone wants to look at it. Because I learned that they have a lot of power to block access, not just to demote or delete content, but they have the ability to block access to millions of websites through multiple browsers. There was a day particular day, March 31st, 2009, where Google blocked access to the entire internet for 40 minutes. So I just started getting more and more interested in the company. And by the end of 2012, I was looking into the growing literature on search results. These are marketers who study search results mainly. And I found, wow, they're very powerful. If you can get up one notch in those search rankings, that can increase your sales by 30%. I also found out that 50% of all clicks go to the top two search results, 95% to the first page of search results. I started to get curious as a scientist, which I've been for 40 years, and I began to wonder, well, if people trust these high ranking search results, could we use them, or could someone use them, or might Google use them to shift people's opinions or beliefs or attitudes or purchases or votes? And I started to conduct controlled experiments. That's what I do. I predicted we could show people biased search results favoring one candidate or another with random assignment to the two groups. And I predicted we could shift voting preferences by 2 or 3% just with bias in search results.
Mm.
And at the time I was thinking, okay, that's not much, but that could affect the outcome of a close election. But in that very first experiment, we got a shift of 43%, which I thought naturally was a mistake. So we repeated the experiment with another group of people. And by the way, these are not college sophomores. This was a diverse group of people who look like the American voting population. Second experiment, we got a shift of 66%. I mean, you're you're looking at me like, "Yeah, that's crazy," and that's exactly how I felt. But that led to more and more and more research, more and more replications. By 2015, we had completed experiments here and in India with more than 4,000 people. Uh, and we published in one of the top journals in the world, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and we introduced what we called SEME, SEME, the search engine manipulation effect, which we said was one of the largest behavioral effects, one of the largest sources of influence that had ever been discovered in the behavioral sciences in over 100 years. And that the search engine seems to be the most powerful mind control machine ever created.
Wow.
And we began to realize just how dangerous this was because you, for example, lean right. I lean
I no,
left.
I'm on the left. I lean
Oh,
left.
okay.
I've always
We
been
both lean left.
yes, yeah.
We'll pretend that you lean right. And so
Okay.
you put up a billboard for your candidate. I put up one for mine. You buy a TV commercial. I buy two TV commercials. The normal kinds of influence that people are subjected to are competitive, which is healthy. Even the
Mhm.
dirty tricks are competitive. But if Google, which now controls 93% of search worldwide, if Google wants to support a particular candidate or party, there's no way to counteract what they're doing. In fact, generally, you can't even see what they're doing. So we have learned over a period of more than 11 years about a dozen different techniques like this, manipulation techniques that the internet has made possible. A
Mhm.
lot of them are controlled exclusively by Google, and if Google wants to use them, there's nothing you can do to counteract, and it costs them nothing. If they want to shift votes in an election, for example, in 2020, they shifted more than 6 million votes to Joe Biden. We have incontrovertible data proving this. If they want to shift a lot of votes in an election, there's nothing you can do to stop them. Well, of course, since then we've figured out how we can stop them. But uh, the point is that they have power, the likes of which no government, no dictator, no company has ever had.
Okay, so let's get into the psychology of this, you being a psychologist and all. What because this isn't forcing people to believe they support a certain candidate or forcing them to vote a certain way. This is just the information they're given. And, a lot of us, I think, when we watch the whole Russiagate narrative, I mean, there was just after the 2016 election, it was Russia did this to us. They were manipulating us by putting out a bunch of information. They bought a bunch of ads on Facebook. People saw these ads and it impacted them. And a lot of us sort of scoffed at this, like, really? You're just going to say that because of some ads on Facebook that Russia bought, that this actually swayed the election in favor of Donald Trump? First of all, from your perspective of seeing this and seeing that Google and search engines are able to do this, was that a possibility? I mean, was Russia able to actually manipulate the election by buying advertisements on Facebook?
They shifted a few votes, but most of these kinds of manipulations are competitive. They're buying Facebook ads, but so's the other side. They're buying
Right.
Facebook ads too. Uh, the fact that they were trying to shift any votes in our election, I find disturbing. But no, did they have a big impact? No. Neither did Cambridge Analytica, by the way, have a big impact.
Okay.
But what I have been discovering and studying and quantifying now for a long time is totally different because it is shifting opinions and votes on a massive scale, not hundreds or thousands of votes, but millions of votes. And generally speaking, you can't see what these companies are doing, and you certainly cannot counteract what they're doing, which is the really, really scary part. And the more we've learned about this, I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
One of these early studies we did was a nationwide study, more than 2,000 people in all 50 states, using a simulator of Google, which we call Cadoodle. It works exactly like Google. We used real search results, real web pages. We randomly assigned people to different groups. So in one group, they're seeing search results that favor candidate A. In the other group, they're seeing search results that favor the opposing candidate. It's the only difference between the two groups is the ordering of the search results. That's it. That's the only difference. We produced an enormous shift in voting preferences among undecided voters of over 40%. But that study was large enough so that we actually had a few people in there, a couple of hundred people, who could spot the bias. See, normally you can't see the bias. So that makes this incredibly dangerous. If someone's forcing you to vote a certain way, they're putting a gun to your head, you can see the source of the
Right.
influence and you can resent it and you can fight back maybe at some point. But if you can't see it, right. So in this study, we had enough people because the study was so big that we actually found a few hundred people who said, wait, these search results look biased to me. Guess what? Those people shifted even farther in the direction of the bias than
What
people
do
who
you,
couldn't spot the bias.
what do you mean? So they actually, so if the bias was liberal, if it was like support the liberal candidate, then they actually were more likely to support the liberal candidate even though they saw the bias?
Yes, and that difference was statistically significant. So why would that be? Well, because people trust algorithms. They think algorithms give you know, unbiased and impartial results because they don't know what algorithms are. They don't understand the role that humans are playing in the background. They don't understand about blacklists and you know there's a trust. Now people also trust Google. Obviously, you and your colleagues trust Google because I happen to know you use a lot of Google
We
platforms
do.
for your
Yeah.
show. And so
We
there's
have
a
no
trust
choice.
there.
I mean, it's not that we trust them. We
Oh,
don't.
yes.
I don't. Well, I
Oh,
don't trust them in a lot of ways because they own YouTube and they screw us over all the time. I also don't trust the search results. But the problem is, and this is maybe one of the problems that you're kind of up against, is that Google owns the world at this point. I don't know how we avoid them. I mean, they own
right.
the map system that we use, and it's a better map system than other maps on the phone. They've got the web
Sure.
browsers, they have the applications, they've got they've got so much stuff that and they own so many more things that people don't even realize that they own, that it's hard to even eliminate. I mean, I can't eliminate them. There's no way I can. I'm on YouTube, for example. I mean, I make money off of that off that platform. I rely on that. And so what do we do?
Well, you can avoid them. It just takes a little bit of effort, and yes, you have to sacrifice a little bit of money. That's true, but you can avoid them. So, for example, if your viewers go to myprivacytips.com, so there's a good link,
Okay.
myprivacytips.com, you'll see an article which begins more or less. I have not received a targeted ad on my computer or mobile phone since 2014.
Wow, really?
So, yeah, so my phone, quick flash, is a secure phone, and my staff, key staff members, have secure phones. They don't have navigators in them. They don't track your location. They don't listen in on all your conversations and record them and transmit them. They don't spy, period.
Yeah.
We use Signal for uh, texting and sometimes for calls and even video calls. Signal uses encryption, end-to-end encryption. We use Proton for email. So even the emails of our organization, uh, which is AIBRT, those are the initials. All of those emails are processed by Proton Mail, which is based in Switzerland. Again, it protects people's privacy. I urge people immediately right now, get yourself a Proton email. You can get a free email. It's all you'll need. For most people will just need a free one. Even if you need a paid one at some point, we're talking $6-7 a month. I mean, that's the value. Think about that. That's actually the value of these so-called free services that Google offers us, which we pay for with our freedom.
Yeah. Okay.
There's Brave. So instead of using Chrome, you can use Brave. You and I right now are communicating through, at least at my end, the Brave browser.
Right.
Brave browser is built on Chromium, just like Google Chrome is. And so, but it's even faster. It turns out it's even faster than Google Chrome because it suppresses all advertisements.
Mm.
So it's a much, much better browser. And then, of course, the search engine. We don't use google.com. You have to be insane to
Right.
use google.com.
Well, I've been
We,
using DuckDuckGo for a long time, but I don't know if they're any better. I mean, I started noticing that
no, they're
they also censor content.
Well, DuckDuckGo you should not be using either because first of all, it's not even a real search engine. They should be sued for false advertising.
Hmm.
Long story, I don't want to go into all that, but they're mainly an aggregator of database information. So they don't really give very good information, but Brave now has its own search engine. So if you use Brave, you can use their built-in search engine, which or you can just go to search.brave.com. Anyway, go to my article,
Yeah.
myprivacytips.com. That will help you get started in protecting your privacy or the privacy of your family. Now, that brings me to the three big problems. The first
Okay.
one is surveillance. So
Right.
Google is surveilling you not just in the 6 or 7 ways that you mentioned earlier, they're surveilling you across more than 200 different platforms, most of which you've never even heard of. So a few years ago, Google bought the Nest Smart Thermostat company. And one of the first things they did was start installing microphones into some Nest products. Someone figured this out after a couple of years, and Google said, "Oh, yes, yes, we have put microphones in there, but don't worry, we've never used them."
Yeah. Why are they there then?
Why are they there? And
Yeah.
why also during those years was Google getting patents on it on methods for analyzing sounds inside the home to determine whether the kids are okay, whether they're brushing their teeth enough, whether the sex life is okay. Why was Google and they're still getting patents like this. Why were they getting patents at the same time that they were installing microphones in people's home without their knowledge? Fitbit. Google bought the Fitbit company. Why?
Yeah.
Because it gives them a massive amount of physiological data. Google has been investing in DNA repositories for a long time. Google is behind 23andMe, which I made my son throw into the garbage can. And no, I didn't make him, but I urged him, and he decided that was a good idea. Thank you, Dad, he said. The point is that Google has been investing in DNA repositories because that gives them our DNA information. They know which fathers have been cuckolded. They they know what diseases you are likely to get. They monetize that information even before you get those diseases.
Hmm.
So we're talking about problem number one, surveillance is just completely, totally. I just had a call from someone, maybe you wouldn't know her, but I'm sure you know the show she's associated with. She's a producer, and she was telling me about her kid's school system that is now using AR. augmented reality, and VR headsets, which are in a program that's been set up by Meta, which is, of course, Facebook's parent company, and Verizon. They're starting to give to school systems AR and VR equipment, which has eye trackers in it. Uh, and they're going to get these things into schools all over the country. Why would they do that? Because it gives them more information. If you can track eye movement and you control the content that people are looking at, then you can find out their emotional states looking at certain content. You can find out where their interests are. You can find out what content addicts them the most easily. I mean, surveillance out of hand. Second problem, censorship. So censorship is where my right wing conservative nutcase friends, that's what I call them, and then they all laugh. But that censorship is the issue they're most concerned about because, their platform got, well, like with their platform got suppressed, censored, demoted, deleted, whatever. That's what they're most concerned about, and it is a problem. But the third category is the most dangerous. The third category is manipulation. And that's what I have been studying now for more than 11 years. And that's where things really get scary because the internet has made possible new forms of manipulating people, new ways of indoctrinating children, new ways of determining the outcomes of elections that have never existed before in human history. And these techniques are controlled by a handful of big tech companies. And believe me, none of them ever comes forward and explains what they're doing. What they do in secrecy.
So of this, what the manipulation. So this is what essentially, like I just mentioned, in 2016, they were accusing Russia of doing to us. That Russia manipulated our elections by manipulating the people. And you're saying, well, yeah, okay, they bought ads, but anyone could buy ads, and we're used to that in election season. Fair enough. Maybe we don't like certain groups buying advertisements, whether it be like big pharma trying to buy advertisements for one particular candidate that they like, or super PACs doing it, or foreign governments doing it. But that's competitive. It's happening on both sides. We're used to it. We see the smear campaigns, we see the advertisements. Like that's pretty typical, no matter who bought them. But you're saying there's something
Correct.
else. There's like a different. There's the search engine manipulation. Is it search engine specifically? Is it that? That's where the manipulation lies? Is very specifically in the search engine when you do a Google for
That's the most dangerous tool, and of course, it's controlled worldwide by one company. That makes it
except
especially
China,
dangerous
right?
because
I mean, I don't think Google's in China,
except
are
main
they? Yeah.
Well, Google off and on has been working with the Chinese government to help the Chinese government control their own people. But you're right. Mainland China generally they have their own techniques of control that are very, very aggressive. But outside of mainland China, every other country in the world, even the Fiji Islands, where I lived with my wife for a year, even the Fiji Islands, more than 90% of search is done on Google. So
On Google, right?
search
Most of it's
engine is
Google.
certainly
Yeah. And we even
uh,
call it Google, like Google it, Googling. Even if you're using a different search
sure.
engine, it's like Kleenex now. Give me a Kleenex. It's the brand name for it's now become the verb. So the search engine is the manipulation tactic. And even the people, I mean, this is what's really alarming to me is that even people who recognize, oh, I'm being manipulated, these search engine results are biased, and they still go with the bias. And you're saying it's because they fundamentally trust the algorithm and they trust the company. So they're thinking, well, then if that's what they're telling me to see, then it's probably for a good reason. Is that what they're thinking in their head?
Yes, and there's another factor as well. So, in fact, if people want to look at the details, we just posted a new manuscript describing a new body of research, and that's at SEME, SEME, and operantconditioning.com. So, you may have heard of operant conditioning. That's, a rat in a Skinner box pressing a lever and getting some food. I was actually B.F. Skinner's last doctoral student at Harvard, so I know a lot about operant conditioning. And it turns out that that's playing a role too in the trust we have in search engine results because about 86% of the searches that we conduct are for simple facts.
Hmm.
What is Donald Trump's middle name. So it
Right.
always turns up in the first search position. And so 86% of the time, we're, again, like rats in a Skinner box. We're learning over and over what's at the top is best, what's at the top is truest. And now think about that. Then the day comes when you type in something like, well, what's the best restaurant in Cincinnati? Well, that's
Hmm.
different. That's an open ended question. And the fact is, you're still going to trust what's at the top because you've been conditioned to trust what's at the top. And so you click what's at the top, that takes you to a web page. And you know what? That web page, that might be very, very biased in favor of one candidate or one
Hmm.
kind of food or one brand of guitar. You don't know what deals Google has made with what companies. So they tell you that a lot of the results you're seeing are kind of organic, which is a good thing. It's natural. And,
Right.
the fact is they have complete and total control over the filtering and the ordering. The filtering means the websites that they're going to show you, and then the order in which they're going to show them to you. They have total control over these two things. And what they're showing you is always biased. Think about it. It has to be always biased because you don't want it to equalize everything. You want it to show you what's best at the top. It's built that way. Even if they don't show an interest in a particular election, their algorithm is going to very rapidly, it's going to start to favor one candidate over another. So that's where they're just negligent and they don't care. It's still going to favor one candidate over another. And that will drive a lot of votes. How many votes can it drive? Well, rule of thumb, easily it can drive between 20 and 80% of undecided voters toward one candidate, generally speaking, without anyone having any idea that this has occurred. And except for the monitoring systems that my team has built, without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace. So 2018, now at this point, I had been studying this for more than 5 years, but 2018, there was a leak of emails from Google to the Wall Street Journal. And in this conversation, one Googler is saying to others, how can we use ephemeral experiences, remember that phrase, uh, to shift people's views about Trump's travel ban? Now, that just blew my head off because that's what we had been studying, the power of ephemeral experiences to influence people since 2013. And here, Googlers were actually saying, how can we use ephemeral experiences that way to influence people? In other words, they know this. They know that these fleeting experiences, which could actually are most of the experiences we have online, we type in a search term while we're typing, they're flashing search suggestions at us, right? That's ephemeral. It disappears, it's gone. They show you search results, you click on something, they disappear, they're gone, they're not stored anywhere, they're ephemeral. News feeds are ephemeral. On YouTube, that sequence of videos, that's ephemeral. That one at the top that they play automatically, the up next video, ephemeral, not stored anywhere. You can't go back in time and see what YouTube sequences were being suggested to people. And they use that ephemeral content to influence, to manipulate, to indoctrinate. Now, how do we know for sure that they're doing this deliberately? Well, in the beginning, I certainly didn't know. I was just speculating. But in recent years, we've had a lot of whistleblowers turn up, people who've either been fired by Google or who've quit. Some people have walked out with documents. Zach Voorhees walked out of Google with 950 pages of documents and a video, all very incriminating. So much content, so much information has leaked from Google that it's not speculation anymore. 96% of donations from Google go to Democrats, which is fine. I like Democrats. But I don't like the fact that a private company that is not in any way accountable to the public has that much power to determine the outcome of elections, to determine how people think and what they believe. I don't think we want that. That it undermines democracy, it undermines human autonomy. So, between 20 and 80% of undecided voters easily shiftable by Google. And so what that means, again, rule of thumb, any election in which the projected win margin is under 4%, Google decides the outcome.
And that's a lot of elections. We've had presidential elections that are to the wire like
Well,
that.
especially national elections around the world. As of 2015, Google was determining the outcomes of upwards of 25% of the national elections in the world. Now, that's quite a few years ago. Their control, their power has increased because internet penetration has increased. More people are using the internet for everything, including getting information about candidates and issues. So we're talking about power that was obscene to begin with, that is not constrained by any laws or regulations. I mean, the fact is, if I were running Google, I would do the same things that they're doing. Absolutely. Generally speaking, no one can see it, and there are no laws or regulations restricting it.
Well, especially if you believe you're in the right in doing it. You think that you're actually protecting humanity, protecting democracy, you're protecting, that's when evil things are often done in under the guise of, but this is do-gooder, we can't have Donald Trump. And so we must stop him at all costs. And so that means we need to suppress any sort of search engine any sort of search results that give any positive information about him. And if you Google him, you're just going to get indictment, 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 bad guy, bad guy, bad guy. Is that what you're saying? And then if you Google Joe Biden, you're not going to get the Hunter Biden stuff or the potential corruption with Burisma or any of that. You're going to get instead, good old Joe loves vanilla ice, chocolate chip ice cream. I mean, the fact
Which
I even
brings
know
me to
that.
sure, which brings me to search suggestions. Our research shows that just by manipulating those search suggestions, you can shift a 50-50 split among undecided voters into more than a 90-10 split with no one aware that they have been manipulated.
Wow.
2016, in the summer of 2016, before the presidential election, if you typed in Hillary Clinton is on Bing or Yahoo, you would get all the things people were actually searching for. Hillary Clinton is the devil, Hillary Clinton is evil, Hillary Clinton eats babies, et cetera, et cetera. If you type that in that summer on Google, and we have this all documented, by the way, you would get Hillary Clinton is awesome and Hillary Clinton is winning, neither of
Wow.
which anyone was searching for. And so, one of the ways they control us is by suppressing negative search suggestions for candidates or causes that they support and allowing those to occur for candidates or causes that they don't support. So that summer, if you typed in Donald Trump is, among other things, you got Donald Trump is a horse in a hospital,
Hmm.
which actually is a very, very funny routine. It's a really funny routine. I forgot the name of the comic who does it, but they're very much aware of all these powers that they have, and over the years, we've discovered more and more of them. We've put names on them. We've published in peer-reviewed journals. We've quantified them. And now we're learning how these techniques work in combination with each other. That's where we are now. So we're looking at multiple exposure effect, multiple platforms effect. Uh, it's um, it's very exciting work. I mean, in a way, we're like Google was in the old days when it first started. It's very exciting, but it's also scary.
Yeah.
So what we do is scary. uh, Summer of 2019, I testified before a Senate committee about my work on Google, and I also, and then Trump tweeted about my testimony. He got all the facts wrong, but still, he tweeted, and Hillary Clinton, whom I had supported always, tweeted back at him that my work had been completely debunked and was based on data from 21 undecided voters. Now, where did that come from? All of a sudden, this media machine starts rolling, beginning with the New York Times, and I have been completely blackballed. I've been cut off from all of my old contacts at Psychology Today, where I was editor in chief for 4 years. USA Today, where I've published multiple articles, and one in which I was attacking Donald Trump, actually, or at least critical of him. U.S. News and World Report, on and on and on. Time Magazine. I've been cut off. The only news organizations now that will publish me are they're right wing, and that's crazy.
That's why you thought I was right
But
wing, because that's what your
I
experience
guess
has been. There are a handful of us that have identified historically on the left who have been fighting against the censorship. And we're looking around at the left, thinking, "What in the world happened?" I mean, the left we always thought was the Democrats were always the party of fight censorship, fight the man, you know, and now they're not. Now they're pro censorship. They're pro all of these things. And for some of us, there is a group of us, and we're very shocked by this and also speaking up. So then people on the left will say, well, then now you're a right winger because apparently being anti-censorship is a right wing position, which is insane. It should be an
that's
American
insane.
position, just an American
Well,
position.
I am not a conservative, so I just have to keep repeating that over and over again. But I love America, and I
Yeah.
love our system of government. I've looked at it. I've looked around the world. I mean, what we have is flawed, but it's the best there is, and that's what I'm trying to protect. I am not trying to help Donald Trump, God forbid. I'm not trying to help conservatives. I'm trying to help our system because with these companies having this much power, our democracy is just an illusion. They have that much power. And oddly enough, back in 1961, President Dwight Eisenhower not only warned about the rise of a military industrial complex, but in that same speech, he worried about the rise of a technological elite. That's his term. A technological elite that could control public policy someday without people knowing. That is where we are now. We were not alert. We have allowed this to occur. We have no laws or regulations in place that put any constraints on Google and similar companies, but I have come up with a way to stop them.
Okay.
So maybe that's what we should focus on in our remaining time because I have stopped them. I have made them stop, at least at times, and the system we're building now will stop them permanently from interfering in our elections and messing with our kids.
And is this
All
just
right. So
with and when obviously we want them to stop messing with our elections and children, but would this also stop them from just manipulating us in every way for anything, like the food in
this system,
Cincinnati?
exactly, this system can be used to stop them from any kind of interference with human decision making.
Okay.
So in 2015, I was contacted by one of the state's attorneys general. He was worried about Google manipulating his reelection in his state. And then I explained how they could do it. Yes, they can do that, and so on. And then he said, but how would you know? And I had no answer for him. Early 2016, I had some ideas about how to find out what they're actually doing. I was able to raise some money, and we set up the first Nielsen type monitoring system that looks at the content that big tech companies are sending to real users, in this case, registered voters. So, you know what Nielsen does? Nielsen, secretly recruits tens of thousands of families. They put special little pieces of equipment in their homes, which allows the company to look over people's shoulders as they're watching TV and to record what they're watching. That's where the Nielsen ratings come from. So 2016, we recruited 95, we called them field agents in 24 states. We developed special software that we installed on their computers. That allowed us to look over their shoulders as they were doing politically related searches on Google, Bing, and Yahoo. We preserved 13,000 searches and 100,000 web pages to which the search results linked. We were then able to compute the bias, whether there was any political bias. We found pro Hillary Clinton bias in all 10 search positions on the first page of Google search results, no such bias on Bing or Yahoo. Of course, they don't count anyway because hardly anyone uses them. But the point is, we calculated from based on our experiments that that level of bias, if it had been seen nationwide, could have shifted between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes to Hillary Clinton without anyone knowing that that had occurred. Well, as it happened, she won the popular vote by 2.8 million votes. So most of that came from Google. Now, is that real? Is this just me being paranoid? Am I a conspiracy theorist? No, because in 2012, where Obama won his election by about 4 percentage points, one of the members of his tech team, which was supervised by Eric Schmidt, the head of Google. So, in other words, Obama's tech team had access to all of Google's tricks. And one of the members of his tech team rather foolishly and carelessly answered a question from a reporter saying, "How many of those points did he get from your tech team? Did Obama get from your tech team?" And he goes, "Oh, half of those points came directly from our team." That's 2.5 million votes. 2.5 million votes came from these tech manipulations. The guy's name is real guy, Ilan Kriegel. You can look him up. It's a real thing. So, what we're saying about what happened in 2016 is also real. And since then, we have built bigger and bigger and more capable monitoring systems. So by 2022, we didn't have 95 field agents. We had in 2022, 2,742 field agents, all registered voters in 10 swing states. And we didn't preserve 13,000 ephemeral experiences. We preserved more than 2.5 million ephemeral experiences on multiple platforms. And did we find any dirt? Did we find any bias? Did we find any manipulations? Oh, yeah. Sufficient to have shifted tens of millions of votes. We've also learned now how to calculate what not just happened, what happened in the election with Google's interference, but now we know how to calculate what happens if you take Google out of the picture. So in 2022, if you take Google out of the picture, the GOP wouldn't have ended up with a two-seat minority in the Senate. They would have ended up with a majority of between 2 and 8 seats.
Wow.
So we can do very precise calculations now, election by election, race by race. And I decided at the end of 2022, the time has come to set up a permanent large scale system like this, which we call it our digital shield, in all 50 states. And I was able to raise about $3 million to get it started. We now have 11,113 field agents, all registered voters in all 50 states, plus 2,275 children and teens. These are children of some of our registered voters. We have preserved not a million, not 2 million, but 38 million ephemeral experiences on multiple platforms. Our system is collecting data 24 hours a day. Every day we add another 30 to 60 field agents. And every single day, the rate at which our data is coming in is increasing. And every single day, the more of this ephemeral data that we preserve, the bigger the threat we are to these companies. And the more worried we get about our physical safety and the safety of our data. Which brings me to the bad news. So, well, first of all, are we finding evidence of manipulation? Absolutely. I mean, it's the same old thing. But I have some good news and bad news. So here we go. Good news is we learned in 2020 that we can use monitoring, like sunlight is the best disinfectant, that we can use monitoring to stop these companies, to make them for the first time accountable to the public. So when we were right near the election in 2020, I sent our preliminary data to Senator Ted Cruz's office. He then, 2 days after the election, November 5th, and two other senators sent a very, very strong letter to the CEO of Google 2 pages long, summarizing Epstein's data. And that very day, Google shut off all of its manipulations in Georgia, where there were two Senate runoff elections scheduled to take place in January. How do we know they shut off all their manipulations? Because we had more than 1,000 field agents in Georgia. We preserved more than 1 million ephemeral experiences in Georgia. We saw them literally stop. So their partisan go vote reminders stopped. There were no more go vote reminders to anyone in
What are
Georgia.
those? What were those partisan go
Uh,
vote reminders?
Well, that's one of the most blatant things that they do. They on their home page now and then, they put some pretty little announcement of some sort. Most of the time, there's nothing on their homepage, but now and then they put some sort of announcement.
Hmm.
So before elections, now and then they say, register to vote.
Yeah,
Here's a link.
right.
They say, mail in your ballot. Here's a link. Uh, and on election day, they say, go vote over and over again. And that homepage, Google's homepage, is seen 500 million times a day in the US. We were monitoring those go vote reminders. Were they sent to everybody? No. In Florida, for example, 100% of liberals got those go vote reminders over and over again during the day from Google. 59% of conservatives did. Now, that is an
Wow.
incredibly blatant and powerful manipulation because we know, literally from a study conducted by Facebook, that when Facebook sent go vote reminders to 60 million of its users on election day, that caused 340,000 people to go vote who otherwise would not have voted.
Hmm.
So the partisan go vote reminder is about as blatant a
Yeah.
manipulation as there can be. The point is, in 2020, Google shut off all of its manipulations in Georgia. That's why we have to have a permanent large scale monitoring system in place because it will make these companies accountable. They've never been accountable and they do all of this manipulating using ephemeral content. If we're preserving a massive amount of ephemeral content, again, we've preserved 38 million ephemeral experiences just in recent months, and we're analyzing it and we're getting faster and faster and faster at our analyses, and we're posting it onto public dashboards, and we're sending what we find to the Federal Election Commission, to members of Congress, to attorneys general. They will stop. They'll stop because if they don't stop, some of these people will end up going to jail because they are breaking some laws.
Hmm.
They're breaking consumer fraud laws. There are some laws, some federal election laws that they're breaking having to do with partisanship messages. They're not allowed to send out partisan messages. That's against the law. So, with the help of a former FEC attorney named Paul Sullivan, we're going to be filing in September the first ever complaint against Google for election manipulation because of the data we collected in 2022.
Wow. Um,
That's the good news. Can I
okay.
tell you the bad news?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
bad
yeah.
news is
It
that
was.
the
I
$3
already
million,
thought this was bad that the fact that they're manipulating us. I thought that was the bad news.
no, the good news is that we can stop them. The
Yeah,
bad
but
news is that we've, that the $3 million is almost completely gone. I'm a really good researcher if you haven't figured that one out yet. Um, but I'm not a good fundraiser. And, you know, we, we're almost out of that money. So if we don't come up with major funding very soon to finish off this system, make it permanent, put in all the right security that it needs, we're going to have to scale it back or shut it down completely, which I think would be nuts. Because if
yeah.
you don't have a monitoring system in place, you don't know what they're doing.
How much do you need?
This is a $50 million project, unfortunately, because it has tremendous security needs. And in the first year, just like with Nielsen, in the first year, it's very, very expensive to get that panel in place because
Yeah.
you need a lot of people. and it's very expensive to recruit them, to vet them, get them to sign an NDA, equip them, train them. It's very expensive. It's $300 to $500 per person. So in that first year, you have to spend a lot of money. After that, the costs drop considerably. But we're at this point now where we're still on track right now to have a full system in place by the end of 2023, so we can protect the primaries. But we have a money problem.
Right. But you need a lot of money. I mean, you're talking about $47 million is what you need additionally
Well, not all at once, but yes, to get us,
over time.
from hurdle to hurdle to hurdle.
Yeah.
Yes, we're talking about a lot of money.
Who would be
Now,
able to fund that, do you think? That project? Who'd want
well,
to?
there are foundations that give a lot of money to support election. They call it election integrity.
Yeah.
Uh, there are some individual donors, some big donors who've given a lot of money to support certain candidates. So there are places. I mean, there are individuals, there are people, and there are foundations out there. There is money out there, and now,
Mhm.
of course, there's the super PACs. So the
Yeah.
super PACs will spend $50 million in a day, sometimes on television commercials. Talk about a waste of money. That's ludicrous.
Yeah.
That's a purely competitive process.
Clearly, it seems like they would wanna invest in something like this if it's looking like these Google manipulations are causing people to lean Democrat. And that leads me to a question of why do you think these big tech companies, this is something that is, people always think we know that big tech leans left. We know they support Democratic candidates and that, that's what they do. But nobody really asked the question of why do they? Because it doesn't, business has always been supported by Republicans, Republican platform of stay out of the way, fewer regulations, fewer taxes, right? So a lot of businesses tend to be Republican because of the lack of regulations and the lower taxation. But big tech, which you would think would have a lot of taxes and a lot of regulations on them, would lean right, but they don't. They lean left. Why do you think that is? Now, a lot of people, the Democratic voting base, the liberal voting base, will say because they're doing the right thing. They know the good side versus the evil side, so they're siding with good. They had to choose between the two, but that's not why they're doing it. Why do you think it is that they support Democrats more than they would Republicans?
It mainly has to do with the founders of those companies. Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of Harvard. Uh, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they dropped out of Stanford to set up Google. Uh, and they hired people that they knew, and they still hire people from colleges and universities in the Northeast. And Brin and Page, the Google guys, the Google boys, they're also they are utopians. So that the culture of the company just revolves around we're going to make the world a better place. One of the leaks from Google a couple of years ago is an 8-minute video called "The Selfish Ledger." If you look up "Selfish Ledger" and then Dr. Robert Epstein, you'll actually get to a transcript of this 8-minute film and to a link where you can watch it. But that 8-minute video was never meant to be seen outside the company. It was put together by their advanced products division, which is run by an old friend of mine now who won't talk to me. But point is that what that says is that Google has the ability to re-engineer humanity. In the film, they call it resequencing human behavior. And it says in the film, according to company values. That's in the film. Sounds like I'm making it up, but it's actually in the film. So that's the culture of Google, and that's been confirmed over and over again by whistleblowers and all kinds of leaked documents. For example, a bunch of documents that came out in 2019 have to do with something you referred to earlier. You didn't have a name for it, but I can give you Google's name for it, and you'll immediately know what I'm talking about. Internally, they have a whole bunch of documents that revolve around the concept of algorithmic fairness. Can you guess what algorithmic fairness means?
What does it mean to them?
Well, it means, showing people content that isn't necessarily accurate, but it's good for their heads and their minds and their souls.
Yeah.
It's politically correct. So, for example, if you go to Google Images and you type in firefighter, police officer, something like that, well, right now, and this is good news, 15% of police officers in this country are female. 50 years ago, there were none. Now it's 15%. That's a good thing. Absolutely a good thing. I mean, women should fight like hell
Mm.
and keep fighting because they still haven't won the battle. The point is, though, that algorithmic fairness means that on Google Images, they're going to show you maybe 50-50, and they're going to put a lot of minorities in there, even if there aren't minorities working in that area. They're going to keep correcting what you see, not not showing you the way things are, but the way they should be. And
Mm.
they call that algorithmic fairness, and I
Wow.
call it social engineering.
Right. Right. That's not algorithmic fairness. Algorithmic fairness would be being fair in the algorithm and being truthful. Right. But instead, that's not what they're doing. Um, Okay, so we know they lean left. We know that they're favoring Democrats. I had a personal experience when I first started my show on YouTube back in early January of 2019. I noticed anytime I did a video about Nancy Pelosi, anytime that, negative, I was critical of Nancy Pelosi, and it would be demonetized every single time. And I thought, this is so strange. Why would they demonetize? And I made a video of it showing the back end of YouTube and what I was seeing and how they would, well, they didn't demonetize it fully, they limited it. So they made it to where it's like limited
Right.
ads are available on this. And that also means that they don't put it in the suggested video search when they do their search,
That's
when
right.
you're on there and you see the algorithm. They wouldn't recommend these videos at all. They'd recommend others, and I thought this is so bizarre because I would talk about so many things that I thought were more controversial than Nancy Pelosi. But whenever I covered her, that video for sure was demoted in some way. And it was just like, well,
That's
they're
right.
clearly protecting their representative. I mean, she's Silicon Valley, and they're protecting their own rep, which is just really bizarre. But they were doing it. I mean, blatantly in my face. I saw
Well,
that.
it's not just Nancy Pelosi, though. Remember, it's a much bigger agenda. It's a huge agenda. It's re-engineering humanity. It's making the world into a place that adheres to the values that they adhere to. It's a
But that's
it
done all the
sounds
time. I mean, that's like a lot of people think that's the role of government, for example. Interestingly, people predominantly on the right have held that viewpoint for a long time. They felt like the government should have rules, laws, regulations that favored certain Christian values, family values. They would want the government to promote, they would say we don't want gay marriage for example because it promotes the wrong kind of morality. So and a lot of government goes along with that. The politicians run on that. There's a lot of people who are okay with this social engineering where we're trying to make a better society. We're trying to keep families intact. We're trying to keep people wholesome and society good and on the good. So now Google says, well, okay, we're doing the same thing, but according to what we think is the moral rightness. That's why I'm against all of it. I don't think it should be done on the right or the left. I think people should be left to make up their own decisions on what they believe is their moral right way to live their lives. I don't like any manipulation whatsoever on that. But at the same time, maybe it's good. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's good to discourage people from smoking. Maybe it's good to
but
discourage people, fathers from leaving the home and abandoning their children. Maybe those are good things.
hold on, let me interrupt because there is a night and day difference between the kinds of influence you're discussing. On the one hand, you're talking about the kinds of influence which are traditional, the government, uh, church groups, and you name it. NGOs of all sorts pumping out their messages, and then the American Cancer Society, and okay,
Right.
so but that's competitive. All of that is competitive, and the government, believe it or not, is actually accountable to the public. And now and then we change their government. The
Right.
people now and then change the government. We actually have a government of the people, by the people, for the people, at least more than any other country does. So, that's what democracy is. It was an experiment in government by the people. The kind of influence, though, that these tech companies are wielding, it's different because they're not accountable to the public, and they're not just shifting votes and opinions in the United States of America, they're doing it around the world. And they
Yeah.
don't always lean left. They do whatever they want to do country by country. In Cuba, they don't support the left, which is in power. They
Right.
support the right because they
Right.
want that government out of power. And then, of course, they've worked very closely at times, off and on, with the government of China to help China control its people. So they do whatever the heck they want to do. And that's one of many reasons why I've been trying to figure out how just to stop them, because you can't allow a private company that's not accountable to any government, to any people, any population, to have that much power and to wield it freely without restriction. That's the current situation. That's the status quo. We all, well, no matter what our politics are, we all should should be outraged by what's occurring. Now, I know people who, at first glance anyway, they don't believe me, but if you dig into my work and you see the work that the superb scientific work that my team has done over the past 11 years, you will be convinced, because I was skeptical of my own work and my own findings in the beginning. But you do things over and over and over again, and then you start to look at leaks from the company, and you realize, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we've been saying. It's real.
Hmm.
And this is the world we live in. Google is by far the worst offender, uh, but these other companies, they're doing some things too. So Facebook and Instagram, they can send out targeted or partisan go vote reminders. Well,
Hmm.
now we're monitoring that. That can be done on TikTok. Uh, you know, there are a lot of platforms out there where there's lots of room for mischief, especially using new techniques of the sort that we have been discovering and studying now for these many years. But the bottom line for me, though, is monitoring, because even if some laws got passed, so let's see, today, no, tomorrow, at least as the moment we're recording, I can tell you that tomorrow a new law, the Digital Services Act, will go into effect in the EU. It's very, very aggressive. It's putting all kinds of restrictions on just the biggest tech companies. And so, in other words, they're really going after Google, but they're not saying
Hmm.
that. And lots of restrictions, lots of penalties. It's to protect people's privacy. It's to protect elections from manipulation. No kidding. They're doing it in the EU. Except there's one problem. They've passed laws like this before, and it's had no impact at all on these companies because they have no monitoring system. In other words, they have no way of measuring compliance with the
Right.
laws they're passing. So
Sure.
the laws make it look like they're doing something, and they're actually doing nothing.
Hmm. Yeah, because they're like, well, we
California has a
ignore it.
law.
How would they know? Sure.
California has a data protection law. There's only, I think, two states in this whole country that have such a law. So we have a law like that in California. What does it do? Nothing.
Yeah.
Because there's no one's measuring compliance with the law.
So you are
Monitoring,
advocating, but
critical.
you are advocating. You believe that the solution to this is a law. So some laws that can be put into place plus monitoring of those laws. Is that what you think the solution
Well,
is?
laws and regulations plus monitoring, I think, would be effective. But the fact is, in the United States, because of who we are as people, we're not going to get those laws and regulations because, as Ted Cruz told me, at a private dinner he invited me to, and we talked tech for 4 hours. The guy is very smart and he understands these issues, but he explained that the Democrats will never allow such laws or regulations to be passed because they're benefiting
Right.
from the
Yeah. So they're not going to
biases
do it.
of.
And then on
They're
top
not
of
going to do
that,
it.
a lot of libertarians will never go for it either. I mean, you could have Rand Paul, who all day long talks about big tech being a problem, but then when it comes to making a law, he's like, no, no. Libertarians say consumer choice. You just give people the information
And
and then tell people to go and use a different search engine.
and Cruz, the way Cruz put it was, Republicans don't like regulation.
Right. So they're not
So
going to do it.
so in this country, there's only one thing we can do for sure, and that is set up a digital shield, a large scale monitoring system. Now, if your audience wants a little peek, an advanced peek at what's coming, they can go to America's, that's with an S, americasdigitalshield.com, and you'll get a little peek at what's coming. What's really coming is going to be much better, but you'll see a mock-up of one of the dashboards that we are going to make available, because we are receiving and analyzing a massive amount of data. We're looking at content that Google and other companies are sending to real registered voters throughout the United States. And we're analyzing the data, some of it in real time, and on dashboards like the one you can see at
Yeah.
americasdigitalshield.com. People are going to be able to see what is going on, and we're going to post specific examples as we find them. We're going to post the statistics as we find it, and we're going to share more detailed information with members of Congress, the Federal Election Commission, state AGs, the federal attorney general. So we are going to put tremendous pressure on these companies. We're also now in touch with a number of big parenting groups. They can put pressure on these companies. These companies will positively back off. We've gotten them to back off in it before, and that was with a much smaller system and much less data than we have now. The more data we have, the larger the archive we build, preserving
Yeah.
all of this information that's used to manipulate people, that's normally lost forever. The more we preserve, the more careful these companies will be. Again, if I were Google, I would do exactly what they're doing now. But if there's a big monitoring system in place running 24 hours a day nationwide, I would stop,
Okay.
because
So you're
people
you're
could
you're
end,
wanting to like give people information, and the more informed we are as a people, the more we're aware of this, then we're going to be putting pressure on these companies to knock it off. And organizations that we're involved with, we want them to pressure the companies. So there'll be more pressure from the people. Yeah, and I agree. I think that when we're aware, we do put a lot of pressure on these companies. And I see on this
but it's
digital
not
shield.
just pressure, it's also these data can be used for lawsuits.
Yeah, right. So it's more
Again,
than right.
as
Exactly. Sure. Sure.
the way Cruz
So
put it was, let the lawyers loose. We
yeah.
have the data. When Trump ran to 63 courts after the 2020 election, and all the courts threw out his cases, 63 courts threw out his cases because he had no data, he had no evidence. We are in the system we're building. We now have met our minimum representative threshold in 8 states. By the end of the week, by the end of next week, we'll have met that minimum in 10 states. In other words,
Mhm.
we're talking about politically balanced representative samples of registered voters in all 50 states. That's court admissible evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So we're
So that
talking
would
about,
work.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
I see here on americasdigitalshield.com, Bing is the search engine it looks like to go with. Looks like it's not biased at all.
Well, except that it's not, the one to go with right now is a Brave's new search engine.
Okay.
Because Brave is I happen to know the guy who founded it. He's the same guy who created Firefox, and he's obsessed. He's obsessed with protecting people's privacy, and somehow getting these tech monopolies to just back
Yeah.
off. I
Okay.
also published an article. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay, I also published an article the day before I testified before Congress, in Bloomberg Businessweek, uh, explaining an easy way, very light touch regulation, that we could very quickly end Google's worldwide monopoly on search. And that is to declare that the index they use, that's the database they use to generate search results, be made into a public commons. And so that everyone can build search engines using their data. We'd end up with thousands of search engines, each focused on niche audiences, just like in news media. So
Yeah.
search would become competitive and that would end their monopoly. That can be done. That's very light touch regulation. And there's precedent for it in law, there's precedent for it in Google's business practices. It's not crazy. It could be done. It might be the next thing that happens in the EU, for example.
Yeah, that would be great if we had a lot of different options. Um, so you're making a lot of big enemies. This is not just, I mean, you're talking about putting a dent into Google's power, their monopoly. So you not only have, from listening to you, an enemy with Google, but you have an enemy with Democrats. They're not going to like you. You are going to be robbing, in their mind, even though they're robbing us, it sounds like, of elections alongside Google, hand in hand, they're robbing us of certain representation. They're going to view you as robbing them of their grip on power. So how, and you mentioned that some of you are not safe. You've had threats. I mean, what are you up against with your safety when it comes to, I mean, these majorly powerful enemies?
Well, we're heading into an area which kind of gets me agitated, but I will just give you a couple of examples. In 2019, that's the summer testified before Congress. I also uh, gave a private briefing to a number of state AGs who were going after Google. So uh, I told them all this stuff, and I gave them lots of specific data. And when I was done, I went out in the hallway, and a little while later, one of these AGs came out in the hall, and he went up to me and he said, "Dr. Epstein," he said, "I don't mean to upset you." He said, "But based on what you've told us," he said, "I think you're going to be killed in some sort of accident in the next few months." And then he walked away. Now, obviously, I was not killed, but my wife was. And, she was a beautiful woman, a published poet. I call her on my Twitter page, I call her, my great adventure, and uh, I haven't really recovered from that at all. I finally, after it's now almost 4 years, I finally just took off the wedding band. But no, I've not dated or anything.
You think they
It's been
killed her?
horrible. Well, it's possible. I can't rule it out, and there were definitely some funny things that happened because her little pickup truck, for example, disappeared from the impound yard, and I was told that it ended up in Mexico. Now, in theory, that was my property. So why did that? And it was never examined forensically. And a witness eventually that I was able to talk to, who was right behind her when she lost control of the truck on the freeway, what the witness said, in my mind, sounded like her brakes had failed. Now, had someone tampered with her brakes? Uh, you know, my one of my daughters. This was a couple of months later when I was starting to function again. My One of my daughters showed me how to use Misty's phone to find out where the phone had gone,
Yeah.
because this was an Android phone, and I could not believe the information that was in that phone because it showed every single place she had gone, every literally the addresses, how much time she had spent, the routes she had taken, and the fact is that Google or some firm that they hired they knew exactly where her little pickup truck was the night before that accident, and they knew it was outside, and the truck disappeared. Now, I'll just give you one more example because uh, I don't like going down this road, as you can imagine, because I have almost 50 people working with me. A lot of them are young people who've come from around the country or even other countries. A lot of them don't even get paid. They just
Yeah.
they just want to do this work. But our managing director last year was walking in downtown San Diego, uh, which is you know, here and there turning into kind of a tent city. It's not like San Francisco, but it's still really relatively safe. But anyway, she's walking with her very handsome husband, who I was always very jealous of. And a man comes out of the blue, pulls a knife, and slits her husband's face all the way from his ear down to his mouth. Then he looks at her and he laughs and he runs away. The first thing that popped into her mind was Google. And by the way, he'll never be the same because it cut through nerves. He'll never be the same again.
Oh my
But
gosh.
why did the man, no matter what kind of lunatic he was, why did he stop and look at her and laugh?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I once heard Dershowitz give a talk in which he said there's a fine line between paranoia and caution. And, you're not paranoid if, in fact, you are irritating some big, powerful companies and then some bad things happen. You're not paranoid if you kind of think, did they do this? That's not paranoia. That's caution.
Right.
I had a reporter from DC. He called asking about my stuff. He was writing an article. 2 days later, he called me up and he said, I just got off the phone with a woman at Google. He said, I'm not sure, but I think she was the head of their public relations. And I had called there asking questions about your work. And she screamed at me, he said. He said, I've never had that happen before. He said that's very unprofessional. He said, I want to tell you two things. Number one, you have their attention. Number two, if I were you, I would take precautions.
Yeah. Yeah, you really should. I've seen people have their lives ruined going after major companies. Stephen Dawsinger is one that comes to mind going up against Chevron, and that is not nearly as powerful. There's a big company, very powerful, a lot of money, but not nearly as powerful as Google plus Democrats. When you get politics, it's not just a company you're going against, but you're going against politics and power. And when you mix all of that together, I couldn't imagine a worse enemy to have. So, I mean, people get killed, by the mob for similar but small microcosm type similar situations than what you're doing, right? Somebody might expose them or might harm their bottom line or take some power away from maybe one of the leaders or something. I mean, that's what you're dealing with on a much larger scale. A lot of people involved, and not all of them are good people. And a lot of them will be willing to do anything in order to keep the status quo going. So, yeah, I mean, I think obviously you should be very careful. Obviously, you're taking on the biggest of the big. And I mean, look, a lot of us have tried to talk about how can we sue Google. I mean, many of us who've had our stuff demonetized or ripped off the platform, we've been censored in some way. That is a conversation we often have. And even when we talk to attorneys will sit there and say, good luck. I mean, you're taking on Google. They have
It,
endless amounts of money. They will just bleed you dry. They don't even have, they'll just keep this going and going and going. They'll just paper log you. So, and that's just
and
trying
they
to sue
also end
them.
up, right. They also actually win at trial. So
Yeah.
I was in the background in the case of eVentures against Google. That you might want to look at that case. That's very illuminating because Google one day just shut down most of their websites. Again, that's one of the powers they have. They can just block
Yeah.
access to websites, and they block access actually to millions of websites. So go to thenewcensorship.com, and for a piece I wrote for U.S. News and World Report, which won't even talk to me anymore. Of course, no mainstream news source will talk to me anymore. But the point is that uh, I've just lost my point. So when we go down this road,
Yeah, we
I
can't
get
sue them is what
I
you're
get
saying, is that they're able to just
well
really
in
get us.
eVentures that case actually went to trial. It took years, but it did go to trial, and eVentures lost. The judgment said that's a private company. They have every right to demote content or to remove content from their search engine. They don't need anyone's permission to do so. And they had nearly put eVentures out of business because they had shut down more than 100 of its websites just because they thought the content wasn't good quality. Again, they have total discretion there. I've read the manual that's used internally to make those decisions. And yeah, they list certain things like pornography and certain things are in
Sure.
there that are pretty clear. And then there's this catch-all category or anything else we don't like.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Well, Dr. Epstein, be careful. Be careful. Thank you for your work, really. Thank you for exposing this, for doing the research, for gathering the data, for proving that they're doing this. Not just, oh, we speculate, we feel it, we think they're doing it, but you're proving that they are doing this and that they're manipulating elections. And there is nothing more really, I mean, when Democrats sit there and talk about we're protecting democracy, we need to stop Trump so that we can protect democracy, and then this stuff is going on, they're not protecting democracy. They're aiding and abetting the destruction of democracy in this country and countries around the world, which is just really absolutely has to be stopped. So thank you for all the work that you've done. I know you mentioned fundraising, so let's talk about that for right before I let you go here. Tell how can we help you?
Well, people can go to mygoogleresearch.com. There's lots of links there to pieces I've published and pieces written about my work. One of the best pieces written about my work and the monitoring system and our current funding dilemma was published just recently in the New York Post by Miranda Devine, a lovely, lovely person. She's the one who broke the story in the Post about Hunter Biden's laptop a few years ago. And she wrote an amazing piece about my work and again our funding needs. And so if you go to Epstein in the New York Post.com, Epstein in the New York Post.com, it'll take you right to Miranda's piece, and it ends rather prophetically. It ends with the sentence, "Only Epstein is standing in the way." So again, mygoogleresearch.com, that's a place where you can get information, but you can also donate funds. And if any of you out there have connections to major foundations, major funding sources, can help me, get a real good connection to somebody or to a foundation, please hunt me down. Just hunt me down. You can do it. Or go to Kim and hunt her down, and she'll hunt me down because I
That's right.
cannot do this alone. I
Yeah,
need help, and I need help. People who, like me, believe that this country is a very special place and that our system of government is the best in the world. And that's all I'm trying to do here. I am trying to just level the playing field to preserve our democracy, to preserve the free and fair election. And I think that's more important than any particular party or candidate.
absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time tonight. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Epstein.
Thank you, Kim. You're amazing.